The Great Hall of the Sylvan Palace was a masterpiece of natural architecture. Vast living trees formed the pillars, and their interwoven branches high above created a ceiling dotted with soft, floating lights. It was a place designed for movement, for the soft rustle of wings and the gentle landings of courtiers. Today it felt like a museum, and Ji-hyun was the central, motionless exhibit. She wore a formal gown of iridescent gray, the color of mourning in her culture. It was beautiful, and it lay perfectly over her legs, hiding the chair she sat in. Her hair was arranged with intricate silver pins. She was a doll carefully prepared for a transaction. The hover chair, a sleek and silent piece of technology, was her true throne. The hall was not full. A handful of Sylvan nobles stood in small, quiet groups, their faces polite but distant. Their presence was a formality, not a celebration. They were there to witness the completion of a bureaucratic task. Across from them stood a small delegation of humans. Ji-hyun had seen images of humans, but seeing them in person was different. They were solid where her people were slender. They stood firmly on the ground, their posture straight but without the poised readiness for flight. Their clothes were simple, dark uniforms without ornament. They looked practical. Her eyes found him immediately. Min-soo. He stood at the front of the human group. He was not particularly tall by human standards, she guessed, but he had a calm stillness about him. His hair was black and neat, his face serious but not unkind. He watched the proceedings with dark, observant eyes. He did not fidget. He did not whisper to his aides. He simply waited. He did not look at her with pity. He did not look at her with the cold assessment of her own people. He looked at her, acknowledged her with a slight, formal nod, and then his gaze returned to the officiant. It was the most normal interaction she'd had in a year. Confused her. The ceremony was short. It was not a binding of souls or a promise of love. It was a reading of legal articles from the treaty, a list of rights and responsibilities. The officiant, a senior Sylvan elder, spoke the words in a monotone. He spoke of mutual support, of diplomatic unity, of the peaceful exchange of knowledge. He did not speak of companionship. He did not speak of a future. When it was time, a Sylvan attendant guided her hoverchair forward to a low table. Min-soo walked to the other side. On the table was a single, modern device, a fingerprint and DNA scanner. The marriage would be sealed not with a kiss or a clasp of hands, but with a biometric signature. Princess Ji-hyun of the Sylvan Royal House, the officiant said. She placed her thumb on the cool glass. A light glowed blue beneath it. A soft chime. Done. Diplomatic liaison Min-soo of United Earth. He did the same. His movements were sure, unhurried. Another chime. The bond is recognized under Galactic Coalition Law and the Sylvan/Earth Accord. The union is sealed. There was a soft, polite sound from the assembled. Not quite applause, more like the rustling of leaves. It was over. Her family approached. Her mother leaned down and placed a light, dry kiss on Ji-hyun's forehead. "Be well, daughter," she said, the words empty. Her father gave a stiff nod. Her brother, Dae, looked at Min-soo with a measuring gaze, as if evaluating the worth of the goods he had just delivered. Then they turned away. They did not walk her to the transport. They returned to their places among the nobles. Her part in their story was finished. A human woman, an aide, came forward. "Princess Ji-hyun," she said, her voice gentle. "I am Soo-jin. I will assist you with the transfer to the orbital shuttle. Liaison Min-soo will follow after the final diplomatic courtesies." Ji-hyun nodded, the movement small. Soo-jin took control of the hoverchair's guidance with a gentle touch. They moved away from the great hall down a smooth, ramped corridor. The sounds of the muted reception faded behind them. They exited the palace not through the grand aerial gates, but through a service passage. The message was clear. She was leaving without fanfare, as a thing being removed. The human shuttle was waiting on a landing platform. It was a blocky, utilitarian craft, nothing like the elegant, winged skimmers of her home. A ramp extended from its side. As they approached the ramp, Ji-hyun heard steady footsteps behind her. She glanced back. It was Minsu. He had not stayed for the courtesies. He had followed her. He walked up beside her chair but did not try to take control from Sujin. He matched their pace. The gravity on the orbital habitat is set to Earth standard, he said, his voice calm and even. It was the first time he had spoken to her directly. It is stronger than here. You may feel heavy or tired at first. That is normal. The medical suite is prepared to help you adjust. He was not offering sympathy. He was giving her data, facts. In a world that had treated her either as a shattered treasure or a broken tool, it was so strange it was almost refreshing. I understand, she said, her voice barely a whisper. They reached the top of the ramp. The shuttle's interior was gray and functional. Sujin secured her chair in a designated space. Minsu stood in the doorway for a moment, the green light of Sylvie framing him. He looked at her, really looked at her, and for a second she saw something in his eyes. Not pity, but a deep, focused attention. The journey will take several hours, he said. You should rest. Then he turned and moved to the pilot's compartment. The ramp closed with a solid thud, sealing off the sight of her homeworld, the scent of the night vines, the last of the world she knew. The engines hummed to life, a deep vibration she felt in her bones. Through a small viewport, she saw the palace shrink, then the forest, then the curve of the planet itself, a brilliant green marble against the black. She was married. She was leaving. She was in the care of a silent stranger heading to a metal world in the cold void. The paralyzing grief she expected did not come. Instead, a different numbness set in. This was not an ending she had fought. It was a door closing, and on the other side was nothing but a silent, heavy uncertainty. She closed her eyes as the stars blurred past, a prisoner in a chair, hurtling toward a fate no one, not even she, could yet understand. Minsu's residence was not in the heart of the main human orbital colony, but on its quieter, older edge. It was a series of connected pods, with large, transparent viewing panels looking out onto the star field. The inside was clean, ordered, and silent. To Jihyun, it felt less like a home and more like a very comfortable laboratory. The gravity was the first and most constant shock. On Sylvie, she had been light, even in her chair. Here, her body felt like a sack of wet sand. Every small movement of her arms required effort. The simple act of holding up her head was tiring. She slept for 14 hours after arrival, a deep and dreamless sleep of pure exhaustion. When she woke, the silence was absolute. On Sylvie, there was always sound. Wind in the leaves, distant song, the rustle of wings. Here, there was only the faint, almost inaudible hum of life support. Minsu was there, but he was not intrusive. He had shown her to her room. It was spacious, with one entire wall a viewport looking at a spiraling nebula. A bed, a desk, and a private bathroom were all arranged for someone who could not walk. He had gestured to a panel by the bed. This controls the environment, lighting, and communication. You can ask for anything. There is no schedule you must follow, he had said, his tone as neutral as a doctor giving instructions. Then he had left her alone. For 3 days she was alone. Food appeared at regular intervals on a tray outside her door, delivered by a simple, quiet service drone. It was human food, hearty grains, proteins, vegetables. It was bland but nutritious. She ate because she had to. She expected him to come, to ask questions, to demand something of her, even if it was just polite conversation, to show her off as his curious new possession. But Minsu did none of these things. She would sometimes hear the soft slide of a door in another part of the residence, or the faint, muffled sounds of activity from behind a sealed door at the end of the hall. He was present, but he gave her a vast and empty space. On the 4th day, frustration boiled over the numbness. She guided her hover chair out of her room and into the main living area. It was as neat and impersonal as the day she arrived. She found him sitting at a low table, reading from a data slate. He looked up. "Can I help you?" he asked, as if she were a guest who had misplaced a towel. "Why am I here?" The question came out harsher than she intended. He placed the slate down. This is my assigned residence. You are my spouse under the treaty. Therefore, this is also your residence. That is not what I mean, she said, her hands gripping the arms of her chair. You do not talk to me. You do not look at me. You keep me like a plant in a room. What do you want? Min-Soo considered her, his head tilted slightly. I want you to become accustomed to your environment, to recover from the journey, to decide what you want to do. It was the most maddening answer possible. Decide what she wanted to do. She was paralyzed in a foreign place. What choice did she have? What is behind that door? She asked, pointing to the sealed one at the end of the hall. My workshop, he said simply. What do you do in there? I work, he said. Then, after a pause, he added, on human medical technology. Interfaces. The word meant little to her. She let out a short, bitter breath. So you are a doctor? Is that why you agreed to this? A professional challenge? For the first time, she saw a flicker of something in his eyes. It wasn't anger. It was more like recognition, as if she had asked a question he had been waiting for. But it vanished as quickly as it came. I am a diplomatic liaison, he said, his voice returning to its even tone. The workshop is a personal interest. He stood up. The colony's central archive has access to Sylvan literature and art databases. Your login credentials are your name. The system will read it to you if you prefer. He walked to the kitchen pod and began preparing tea, his movements efficient. He was ending the conversation. Ji-hyun went back to her room, seething. But later, out of sheer, desperate boredom, she accessed the archive. She found the Sylvan epic poems. She commanded the system to read one aloud. The voice was synthetic, but the words were hers. The story of the Skyfinders, her ancestors, filled the sterile room. The next day, a small, real book was outside her door. It was an old, physical book with paper pages. It was a volume of human nature poetry, translated into the common galactic language. There was no note. She read it. The poems were about mountains and rivers and stubborn trees growing from cracks in stone. They were about weight and stillness and deep roots. They were the opposite of everything Sylvan. She hated them. She read them twice. Pattern began. Days passed in quiet isolation, broken only by the arrival of food, the view of the stars, and the occasional brief sighting of Min-Soo. He would ask a simple, direct question. Is the temperature acceptable? Or the food is suitable? He never asked how she felt. He never commented on her spirit or her loss. He began to leave other things. A puzzle of interlocking metal pieces. A screen that displayed slowly shifting patterns of human art. Once a simple green plant in a pot. It produces oxygen, was all he said when she looked at it. It was kindness, she realized. But it was a clinical, impersonal kindness. It was the kindness of someone providing ideal conditions for a specimen to observe itself. He was giving her everything she needed to exist, and nothing that required him to engage with the person she was. He was a careful, silent warden, and her cage was the most peaceful, well-appointed prison she could imagine. And in the deep quiet, with nothing to fight against but the endless stars outside her window, Ji-hyun began, for the first time, to truly feel the crushing weight of what she had lost, and the terrifying emptiness of what was to come. The silence in the residence became a thing Ji-hyun could measure. It had weight and texture. It was the hum of the air recycler, the soft click of her door opening, the distant sound of Min-Soo's workshop door sealing shut. It was the space between one day and the next, all of them the same. The bitterness she had nursed like a cold jewel began to feel heavy. It was a passion with no outlet. You could not rage against a wall that simply absorbed the sound. Min-Soo's calm neutrality was that wall. Curiosity was the only thing left. It was a small, stubborn weed growing in the cracks of her despair. He was hiding something in that workshop. Not out of malice, she sensed, but out of a deep, focused privacy. What did a diplomatic liaison need with a sealed lab? Her tablet gave her access to the Habitat's general network. It was for entertainment and basic communication. It was heavily filtered. She could not access sensitive systems, but she could search public records. She started with him. Minsu. The name was common. She found his public diplomatic profile. It was sparse. His assignment, his education in xenorelations and applied biointerface theory. Biointerface. That was the word he had used. She searched it. The public articles were technical and dry. They spoke of connecting machine intelligence to organic nervous systems, prosthetics, nerve regeneration templates. It was advanced human medical science. A cold, strange feeling began to stir in her stomach. She searched deeper using different phrases. She found old, archived news articles from Earth. They were about a company, a small research firm that had done pioneering work in neural synapse bridging. The articles mentioned a family tragedy. The founder's young daughter had been in an accident, a ground car collision, a spinal injury. The article named the founder. It named the daughter. It did not name the brother who had been a young graduate student at the time, studying xenobiology. But Ji-hyun could add numbers. She could follow a thread of logic as cold as the space outside her window. Minsu had not just studied biointerfaces. His family had been shattered by the very thing that had broken her. He had not become a doctor in a hospital. He had gone into deep, specific research, and then he had become a diplomat to a people known for their delicate, winged physiology. A coincidence? Perhaps. But the marriage proposal had come from the human side. Her family had simply accepted the easiest solution. What if it was not random? Her heart beat faster. She guided her chair out into the hall. It was late by the habitat's artificial cycle. The main living area was dark, lit only by the starlight from the viewports. The door to his workshop was sealed, a solid dark gray slab. Next to it, almost invisible, was a small port for physical data drives. And beneath that, a narrow slot, a disposal slot for solid waste from the lab. Used material capsules. She waited until she heard the soft sound of his shower in his private room. She moved her chair to the workshop door. Her hands, which she had thought useless for anything important, were steady. She leaned down and peered into the disposal slot. Inside, she saw nothing. But taped to the inner rim of the slot was a tiny, torn corner of a transparent film. It was a printed label. She could just make out a few letters in the human alphabet. She knew the letter shapes. She had been studying them. It read, Neural Mapping Feed. A neural mapping feed. Not medical technology in a general sense. Specific. Direct. She returned to her room. The pieces were forming a picture she did not want to see. Had she been chosen? Not as a burden to be pawned off, but as a subject. An ideal test subject for his life's work? A paralyzed princess from a species with elegant nerve structures, delivered to him by treaty. It was monstrous. It was logical. The next morning, when he placed her breakfast tray on her desk, she did not look at the food. She looked at him. You lost someone, she said, her voice flat. Minsu froze. It was the first time she had seen his calm mask slip. He did not look surprised. He looked, for a second, intensely weary. Yes, he said. Your sister. In an accident. Like mine. He was silent for a long moment. Then he gave a single, slow nod. And you study how to fix what was broken in her. I study how to bridge gaps, he corrected quietly. But it was a confirmation. And this? She gestured around the room, at the habitat, at herself. This marriage? Was this your research proposal? A convenient, treaty-bound test subject delivered to your lab. The air left the room. Minsu's face became very still. He looked at her, and she finally saw the full force of the attention he had been hiding. It was not cold. It was fiercely, terribly intelligent. No, he said, and the word was firm, absolute. He took a step closer, then knelt down so his eyes were level with hers. It was not a gesture of pity. It was to make sure she heard him. I requested the match, he admitted, his voice low. After I read your medical files. But not for a test. My work. It is ready. It has been ready. But it is not a machine you turn on. It is a partnership. A dialogue between mind and machine. It requires a will that has not broken. A mind that has not given up. He paused, searching her face. I saw the reports from your doctors. They said your spirit was crushed. But in the footage from the treaty signing, I saw your eyes. You were not crushed. You were trapped. There is a difference. Ji-hyun could not breathe. The walls of her quiet prison were shaking. I can offer you a key, he said. But you are the only one who can decide to turn it. You are the only one who can fight for the other side. I cannot do that for you. No machine can. He stood up. The moment was over. The calm mask was back. But it was different now. She had seen what was behind it. A pain as deep as her own, and a purpose forged in fire. I will be in my workshop, he said. The offer is there. It is not an obligation. It is a choice. When you are ready to choose, you will know. He left, closing her door softly behind him. Ji-hyun sat in the humming silence. The bitterness was gone. In its place was a torrent of something else. It was not hope. It was too sharp for that. It was the terrifying, electric feeling of seeing a door where before there had only been a solid, endless wall. The quiet in the residence changed. Before it had been empty. Now it was charged like the air before a storm. Ji-hyun felt it with every breath. An offer had been made. A real one. Not of pity or duty, but of a terrible, difficult possibility. For 2 days she did not speak to him. She watched the nebula swirl outside her window, its colors bleeding into the black. She thought of her family's dismissal, a clean and final cut. She thought of the heavy gravity, a constant reminder of her weakness. She thought of Min-soo's sister, a ghost who shaped this present. And she thought of his words, a will that has not broken. Was hers unbroken? It felt shattered, ground to dust by helplessness and shame. But dust could not feel this burning, furious need to know. Dust did not hunger. On the third morning, she guided her chair to the sealed workshop door. She did not knock. She simply said, I am ready to see the key. The door slid open almost immediately, as if he had been waiting. The space inside was not a sterile lab. It was a workshop lit by soft white light. Tools were arranged neatly on magnetic walls. In the center was a large, open platform. And beside it, on a support frame, was the suit. It was not what she expected. It was not bulky armor or a medical device. It was elegant, almost like art. A sleek exoskeleton of a polished, dark gray material, lined with soft blue lights along its limbs. It looked less like a machine and more like the ghost of a dancer, waiting to be filled. Min-soo stood beside it. He wore simple work clothes. He did not smile. His expression was serious, focused. This is a neural integration framework, he said. It reads the faint electrical signals from your spine above the injury. It amplifies them. It translates your intention into movement for its own actuators. You do not steer it with a joystick. You must think of moving. Your mind must learn to speak to it, and it must learn to listen to you. It is a conversation. And at first, you will both shout and misunderstand. He was not selling her a miracle. He was warning her of a hard road. What is the first step? She asked. The first step is the link, he said. He gestured to a chair beside the platform. It had open sides. You transfer here. Then we place the framework onto you. The initial connection is intense. She moved her hover chair next to it. With a calm efficiency, he helped her shift from her chair to the new seat. His hands were firm and certain, without hesitation. He treated her body as a thing to be managed, not a tragedy. It was, again, strangely freeing. He began to attach the pieces of the suit. The cool, smooth material clicked into place against her legs, her hips, her spine. It was light. He connected a fine mesh cap to her head. Wires, thin as threads, linked it to the suit. Breathe, he said, his eyes on a data screen. The first connection is now. A switch was thrown, not with a sound, but with a sensation. It was like lightning under her skin. A million silent sparks erupted from the small of her back, shooting down pathways that had been dark for over a year. It was not pain. It was raw, shocking information. She gasped, her back arching. The blue lights on the suit flickered wildly. On the data screen, a chaotic storm of light erupted where her lower neural map should be. Your nervous system is recognizing the interface, Minsu said, his voice calm amidst her storm. It is trying to talk. Now you must try to listen. Think of your right foot. Think of pointing your toes. It was a ridiculous thought. She had buried that part of her body in a corner of her mind. A lost country. She tried to find the mental map. She focused, straining. She thought of the motion. Nothing happened. The lights continued their random dance. Frustration burned hot in her chest. It is not working. It heard you, Minsu said, pointing to a subtle, repeating pulse in the storm of lights. That is your signal. The suit heard the thought, but it does not know how to answer yet. You must think it again, and again, and again. You must teach it the language of your intention. It was maddening. For an hour, she thought of pointing her toes, flexing a knee, shifting a hip. The suit would occasionally twitch, a jerky, spastic movement that was nothing like her thought. Sweat beaded on her forehead from the mental effort. It was harder than any physical labor she had ever known. Finally, exhausted, she let her head fall back. I cannot. Minsu powered the suit down. The lightning sensation faded to a dull hum, then silence. He began to remove the framework. You did, he said. She looked at him, angry, defeated. You made a connection. Faint one. The suit twitched. That is a word. A first, clumsy word in a new language. He placed the suit back on its frame. That is all for today. More than that will overwhelm the pathways we are trying to build. He helped her back into her hover chair. Her body felt strangely heavy again, but her mind was buzzing, full of the echo of those phantom sparks. Was it like this for your sister? She asked softly as he worked. He paused. She never had this chance. The technology was not ready. What I learned from her, it built this. He finished securing her in her chair. We will try again tomorrow, if you choose. He turned back to his data screens, already analyzing the results from their session. Tren moved slowly back to her room. She felt drained, but the emptiness was gone. In its place was a raw, aching fatigue, and beneath that, a single solid fact. She had thought of moving her foot, and somewhere, in a language of light and electricity, something had answered. It was not walking. It was not freedom. But it was a first word. And for the first time since her fall, the silence in her world was not absolute. It held, within it, the faint, possible echo of a reply. The workshop became Jihyun's world. The view of the nebula was forgotten. Her old hoverchair sat unused in the corner of her room. Each morning, she moved herself to the transfer chair, and Minsu would fit the sleek, gray framework to her body. The sharp lightning of connection became familiar, a strange door swinging open in her mind. Progress was not a straight line. It was a struggle fought in silence, broken only by Minsu's quiet instructions and the hum of machinery. Focus on the knee, not the whole leg, just the joint. Imagine the hinge. His voice was a constant, calm guide in the storm of her frustration. She would concentrate until her head ached. Some days, the suit's leg would jerk forward in a sudden, violent kick. Other days, nothing happened at all, and the feeling of failure was a cold stone in her stomach. Minsu never praised empty effort. He read the data. The signal is cleaner today, he would say, pointing to a line on his screen that looked no different to her. Or, the left side is learning faster than the right. We will adjust the sensitivity. He was not her therapist. He was her engineer, and in that she found a grim respect. He saw her not as a patient to be healed, but as a system to be integrated. It was honest. Weeks passed. The jerks became smaller, more controlled twitches. Then, one afternoon, she thought of lifting her right heel, just an inch. The suit's foot lifted smoothly, held for a second, and settled back down. She froze, staring at it. She had done that. Not the suit. She had. Minsu looked from the foot to his screen and gave a single, slow nod. Good. That is proprioception. The suit is learning where your body is in space. Now, the other side. It was a tiny victory, felt larger than her entire wedding day. As she learned the language of the machine, she also learned the language of Minsu's work. He began to explain things, not to comfort her, but because she needed to know to improve. He told her about feedback loops, signal clarity, neural damping. One evening, exhausted after a session where she had managed to shift her weight from one hip to the other, she did not go directly to her room. She stayed in her chair as Minsu cleaned a piece of the suit's chest plate with a focused intensity. "Who else knows about this?" she asked, her voice rough from effort. He didn't look up. "A few former colleagues. My work was open source, shared. But the company we worked for was bought by a larger firm. A coalition defense contractor." She understood implications. They wanted to weaponize it. "Control it," he corrected, finally meeting her eyes. "Turn a tool for agency into a tool for command. Remote-controlled soldiers. Pilots wired directly into ship systems until their minds burned out." I refused. "They used legal means to tie up the patents, freeze the research. I took the core designs and left. The diplomatic corps was a place to go. A way to continue my work quietly, in a new context." A new context. Her. She was his new context. Not a secret weapon, but a silent rebellion. "Why keep going?" she asked. "Because my sister deserved a choice," he said simply. "You deserve a choice. Not everyone will use a tool for good. But that does not mean you stop making tools for those who will." The next day, the training changed. He integrated balance. The suit could hold her upright, but she had to learn to trust it. The first time its actuators locked straight and she was lifted from the chair, a panic so primal it stole her breath seized her. Her hands gripped the support bar until her knuckles were white. She was towering, unsteady. The floor looked far away. "Breathe," Minsu said, standing close, his hands ready but not touching her. "The suit will not let you fall. You must tell it to step." It took a full minute for the fear to loosen its grip. She looked down at him, and for the first time she was looking down. She thought of the command. Left foot, forward. With a smooth, hydraulic sigh, the suit's left leg moved. She swayed, but the suit compensated. Then the right. It was not walking. It was the idea of walking made real by steel and will. One step, then another. 2 steps from the support bar to the workshop platform. She reached it and gripped the edge, her whole body trembling, not from weakness, but from a surge of pure, undiluted triumph. Minsu did not cheer. He watched the data stream, but when she looked at him, his face was lit by the soft blue glow of the suit's lights. There was something in his eyes she had never seen before. It was not the calm focus of the engineer. It was the fierce, quiet joy of a witness. He had given her the key, and she was turning it. They did not speak of it. Words would have broken the spell. He helped her back into her chair, powered down the suit. But as she moved to leave, he spoke. "The annual Galactic Coalition Gala is in 10 days. On Sylvier. It is expected that diplomatic personnel and their spouses attend." The mention of her home, of that world, was a splash of cold water. The gala was a whirl of flight and grace. Everything she was not. He continued, his voice even. "It is your choice. We can send our regrets. Or," he said, looking at the suit on its frame, "you can choose to show them something else." He left her with that. The choice was hers. She looked at the elegant gray framework. It was no longer just a key to movement. It was a key to a door she had thought slammed shut forever. The question was no longer if she could walk. The question was, for the first time in so long, what did she want to do? The great hall was exactly as Ji-hyun remembered, and yet completely foreign. The scent of night-blooming vines hung in the air. The soft lights drifted among the living branches. The music was a delicate, swirling thing designed for beings who could dance on air. Sylvan nobles moved through the space with effortless grace, their wings shimmering, their laughter like wind chimes. From the shadowed entrance, Ji-hyun watched them. For a year, this sight had been a knife in her heart. Now, She felt nothing but a cold, clear calm. Minsu stood beside her, wearing a simple, dark human formal uniform. He was a still, solid presence. "Ready?" he asked, his voice low. She took a deep breath, the sweet air filling lungs that no longer felt tight with dread. "Yes." They stepped forward into the light. The change in the room was not instant. It was a slow wave. A pair of courtiers glanced over, their polite smiles fixed. Then their eyes dropped from her face to her legs, and their smiles froze. Their wings gave a confused, twitching flutter. Jihyun was walking, not in a hover chair, not with a cane. She walked with slow, deliberate, and perfectly steady steps. The suit was visible, but it was no longer the clinical framework from the workshop. Minsu had modified it. The gray material was polished to a soft sheen, and the blue light lines were now a subtle, pulsing silver, tracing the edges like fine filigree. Over it, she wore a gown of deep blue, cut to flow with her new movements. It was not Sylvan. It was something new. A silence spread out from her like a ripple in a pond. Conversations died. The music seemed to grow faint. Every eye in the hall turned to her. She saw her parents near the high table. Her mother's hand flew to her mouth. Her father's face was blank with shock. Her brother Day stared, his wings half unfurled in pure instinct. She walked through the center of the hall, Minsu one step behind and to her side. His posture was not that of a caretaker, but of an equal partner. The click of her steps on the polished wood floor was a sound the hall had never heard before, firm, grounded, undeniable. She stopped before the high table. The gathered coalition ambassadors and dignitaries were a blur of different shapes and sizes behind her. She only saw her family. "Mother, father," she said, her voice clear and carrying in the quiet. "You look well." Her mother found her voice, a strained whisper. "Jihyun, you are standing." "I am," Jihyun said. She did not smile. Her father's eyes darted to Minsu, suspicion dawning. "What has been done? What human technology is this?" "It is a tool," Jihyun said, turning slightly to include the watching crowd. "One that listens to the mind. It was not given to me as a gift. It was built as a partnership. And it was offered as a choice." She let her words hang there. The implication was clear. Her family had given her no choice. They had seen only a broken thing to be disposed of. A high-ranking official from a furred species stepped forward, his large eyes curious. "This technology, it is available?" Minsu spoke for the first time, his voice calm and firm in the vast hall. "The core designs are open source. They are not a secret. They are a foundation. My work and now our work," he said with a slight nod to Jihyun, "will be shared freely with any species who wishes to use it for medical and quality of life integration. We propose a new joint initiative, the Sylvan and Earth Neural Integration Project. Not for soldiers, for people." A murmur went through the crowd. This was not a diplomatic gesture. It was a declaration, and it was made not from a position of power, but from a position of proven, quiet strength. Jihyun's brother Day finally found his voice, edged with old scorn. "So you become a human machine? You trade our grace for their gears?" Jihyun turned to him. She thought a command. The suit responded with perfect sensitivity. She took 3 smooth, silent steps toward him, stopping when they were eye to eye. She moved with a control no flying Sylvan could ever achieve in the air. It was a sovereign, grounded grace. "I traded nothing," she said, her words for him alone, but heard by all. "I was discarded, and in the place you sent me, I found not a jailer, but a partner. With him, I did not just learn to walk." She paused and looked out at the stunned, silent nobility of her homeworld. "I learned to build a new path." She turned her back on her brother and faced the assembly. The fear was gone. The bitterness was gone. In their place was a certainty as hard and real as the suit that held her upright. "No alien desired the paralyzed princess," she said, her voice ringing clear, completing the story everyone had written for her. "So they married her off to a human." She looked at Minsu, and for the first time in that hall, a true small smile touched her lips. Then she looked back at her people, her gaze steady and unafraid. But she found her voice, and now she has something to say. The silence that followed was no longer shocked. It was breathless, waiting. The story was over. A new one was just beginning, and for the first time, Ji-hyun was its author. The air on Sylvier was always sweet, thick with the scent of night-blooming vines. In the high towers of the royal family, it should have been a comfort. For Princess Ji-hyun, it was just the smell of her old life, a life that was over. She sat by the wide, open window of her chamber, her hands folded neatly in her lap. From the neck up, she was the image of Sylvan perfection. Skin like polished moonstone, dark eyes that held the depth of their forest world, hair like a stream of ink. Below that, a soft, woven blanket covered her legs. They did not move. They had not moved for over a year. The accident was a stupid thing. A flaw in a private skimmer's gravity ring during a routine flight. A short, violent plummet into the canopy. Others had walked away with minor cuts. Ji-hyun's lower spine was shattered. On Sylvier, where a people's identity was woven with the grace of flight, with dancing on air currents and leaping between the high branches, it was a death sentence. Not of the body, but of the spirit. She heard the murmurs before the doors opened. Her parents, the king and queen, and her elder brother, Dae. Their wings, usually held in proud, elegant folds, were slightly taut, a sign of agitation. They entered, their steps silent on the mossy floor. Ji-hyun, her mother began, her voice trying for warmth but landing on duty. You look well today. Ji-hyun said nothing. She had learned that silence was her only real power now. Speaking invited pity or, worse, discussion about her condition. Her father, a tall man with silver streaks in his hair, cleared his throat. The healers have given their final report. Their technologies cannot repair the damage. The neural pathways are silent. We knew this, Ji-hyun said, her own voice surprising her with its flatness. It confirms our path forward, her brother Dae said. He avoided her eyes, looking instead at the floating city beyond the window. We must be practical. The alliance with the northern clans is fragile. A marriage bond would secure it. A cold knot tightened in Ji-hyun's stomach. This was the old conversation, the one they had stopped having after the accident. When she was whole, she had been a key piece on the political board. Now she was a piece that no one wanted to play. And who, she asked slowly, would seek a bond with me? I am a chair, a thing to be wheeled to dinners and ignored. Her mother flinched. Do not speak so. You are still a princess of the blood. A princess who cannot fly. A princess who cannot dance at her own wedding feast. A princess who cannot produce an heir without extensive, undignified medical intervention. Ji-hyun listed. Each fact a stone dropped into the quiet room. Which clan leader desires such a partner? Which ally sees value in a broken thing? The silence that followed was her answer. It was the same silence that filled her rooms, her days, her future. It was the sound of being erased. Her father finally spoke, his words careful and heavy. The northern clans have declined, as have the eastern trade families. The offers, when they came, were for lesser roles. Concubinage, custodial arrangements. Humiliation, hot and sharp, washed over her. They had been shopping her around, her own family, and had found no buyers. So what is the solution? Ji-hyun whispered. A quiet tower for the rest of my days? No, Dae said, finally looking at her. There was no malice in his gaze, only the cool calculus of politics. There is the treaty with the humans, the new one, regarding the mineral rights on the asteroid belt. Ji-hyun blinked. Humans, the new members of the wider galactic coalition. They were a strange, wingless people, known for their odd persistence and their strange, heavy world strength. They were seen as clever but crude, innovative but lacking in grace. To the Sylvans, they were useful but not equals. The human diplomat, her father continued. His name is Minsu. He has been agreeable. The human government seeks closer ties. A symbolic union would satisfy the treaty's final bonding clause. It would be a gesture of great trust. The words hung in the sweet air. Ji-hyun felt the world shrink, then snap into a terrifying new shape. "You are giving me to a human," she stated, the words numb on her tongue. "It is a marriage of political convenience," her mother said quickly, as if that made it better. "It secures the treaty. It gives you a purpose. And the humans, they are different. Their values are not ours. His reaction to your condition may be less severe." Ji-hyun understood what was not being said. To the humans, her paralysis might not be the ultimate shame it was here. It might just be a medical fact. To her family, this was not cruelty, but the best possible solution. They were disposing of a problem and gaining a stable alliance in one move. She was being traded like a shipment of, or she looked out the window again. A flock of young sylvans, their wings bright and strong, swooped past in a game of aerial tag. Their laughter, carried by the wind, sounded like bells. It was the sound of a life she would never have. They waited for her outburst, for her tears. She gave them none. The icy calm that had been her survival for a year now sealed over everything. "When?" was all she asked. "The ceremony will be in 3 cycles. Here at the palace. It will be small, official." Her father's voice held a hint of something that might have been regret, or maybe just relief. They left her then, the scent of the night vines trailing after them. Ji-hyun did not move. She could not. She was a princess of a people who lived in the air, and she was forever grounded. And now, she was to be sent away to a stranger from a heavy, graceless world, because no one else would have her. The last light of Sylvier's sun warmed her face. She closed her eyes. Inside, behind the calm mask, something hard and sharp began to form. It was not hope. It was not acceptance. It was a cold, quiet ember of defiance. If this was to be her fate, she would not go softly. But for now, she just sat, a silent statue in a gilded cage, waiting for the door to open to a future she could not yet imagine.